Welcome to OwlMtModels video instructions on F-50 series flat cars, part 3, covering the installation of the trucks and couplers. This video will supplement but not replace the written instructions with additional step-by-step guidance and help show techniques for assembling this model. We hope you find it helpful. For the F-50-10 and 12 models, AccuRail trucks are provided, along with plastic AccuRail wheel sets. At a future date we may switch to Intermountain metal wheels. These are pretty easy to assemble. Basically spread the side frames of the truck and snap the needle points in like that. Should roll easily now. The earlier cars we were able to get red caboose trucks, the old red caboose tooling. These trucks have been improved over the last few years. The bolster design has been changed. So I'm going to come in here and descrew these with my flush cutting pieces. We're only going to do one truck at this time. So there's the bolster. Here's the side frames. In the old days, these were too flexible and the bolsters were pivoting and falling apart and having problems. The newer versions are much better than the old ones and do not seem to have that problem. And we've also found that Bowser makes correct length wheel sets for these trucks, so they roll very much better than the old ones. The old ones, in fact, were wide enough and gauged that the old wheel sets, like the plastic wheel sets and so forth, would actually fall out of the truck. So we've again solved that problem. One thing to do here is just inspect around the bolster pins here on the side frames and make sure that there's no flash. If there is some flash, you probably want to come in with a file or some light sanding stick and just clean up any place you see a little bit of flash there. There can also be a little bit of flash around the journals, and go ahead and clean that up while you're at it. Alright, so the springs are down. This opening here for the upper part of the bolster is up, and I launch it there. Bolster, same thing, the kingpin section of the bolster there, and basically set it like this and press. And okay, this is probably the rigid side. Let's see how the other one goes in. There it goes. And snap. Okay, that's the rigid side. That side is not moving. The other side should move fairly easily with the weight of the car on it. Now, if you want to, I know some people make these trucks rigid. That's certainly an option. We'll be inserting the Bowser wheel sets here. And those roll well enough I can start the wheel spinning and set it down and it takes off on its own. Now some people will want the trucks to be square, so if you want to square it up on a flat surface like this, and some people either come in and put super glue in these joints. One of the other options I've heard is come in with a soldering iron and slightly melt the plastic right there. That's kind of a one-shot deal. If that gets fouled up, the truck is pretty much done. But at this time, these really are the best option for getting T-section trucks. And of course, here's a comparison side shot with the AccuRail U-section truck. The earlier cars, Dash 5, 8, and 9, had the T-section trucks, and the Dash 10s and 12s had the U-section trucks. Sometimes later, the earlier series cars had replacement trucks added to them. So now, with a pair of these trucks, we'll be able to fit the car, although first we'll be doing the couplers. Okay, here are the coupler lids, coupler box covers. I'm going to clean up the sprues on the end of these since we didn't do that before when we cut them off. Should just be a couple of light strokes. Here's the other one. Alrighty. And I'm just going to do a quick test fit on there. That looks pretty good. Check the other end. Yep, that looks pretty good. Okay, coupler. These are 146 couplers from KD. So these have the whisker springs, like that. Got to make sure that those whisker springs actually get down in the coupler box, like that. And then put the coupler lid over the top. Normally I'd keep my fingers a little bit closer here so that nothing can escape. And now for the screw. These are the shorter screws. And there's that. It's a little bit too tight. There we go. There we go. Now it's self-centering. Now, one option that might help if it's starting to be tight, and I haven't done it yet, I'm going to grab my small needle file. There it is. This is a small triangular file, actually. And I'm going to just make sure that these draft gear openings are flush. Shouldn't need to take very much off. In fact, I did this too soon. I'm going to open this box up and do that adjustment real quick. These holes, remember, are pre-tapped. If you've gotten to this point and those aren't pre-tapped, that's not a good thing. It's also possible to go clean up the sides of these a little bit. We found in testing that these narrow draft boxes actually work pretty well. The only place they wouldn't work is if you're doing 18-inch radius curves and trying to use a magnetic uncoupling system and delay an uncoupling around the curve. It just doesn't really work for that, but very few people are doing that anymore. Okay, so there's the screw. One nice thing about these draft gear boxes being narrow like this is it actually forces the draft force through the center line of the car, and the coupler can't bend out to the side and cause the car to buckle. There we go. One option is, if you really want to have your normal wider coupler box opening, is you can come in here with a file and just blow the sides of this box clean out, and that will let the coupler swing farther. But generally, not the need to do that. There's the other coupler. And the screw. There we go. Yep, like that. And now for your F-50-Series cars, we'll grab the longer screws, and these trucks will be dropping a screw there into the bolster. Found the hole. Make sure that pivots easily. The car body here, remember the ones that come in the kit are actually cast in color, so they will be the correct color to match the trucks. All you really have to do is paint them and prep them for decals. Light coat of paint. There's this truck. Looks like the trucks are pretty square. And so now we just turn the car over. There it is. It rolls fine. It works. Now the last bits are a little bit tedious, but not too bad compared to what we've already done. This is the stirrup steps and the brake wheel. And the stirrup steps look horrible in this position, but they're not that bad. They're actually soft brass. They bend back very easily in a couple of minutes with a pair of pliers. you should be able to come in here and straighten these all out. Like that. You're given 5 of them, so if any of them actually do break, you'll have a spare. Straighten out. Most of these little bits here. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to check the legs that actually go into the car side. Some of these are a little bit tweaked. I'm going to straighten those out. This one's maybe tweaked a little bit too. There we go. Easy enough to do with a small pair of pliers. So now, get our flush cutting pliers here. Cut these off. Now that sprue is pretty well cut down to the correct shape of the part. I'm going to go ahead and use a file here to clean. One thing to remember to do with the couplers is to bend them up slightly. KD doesn't have them bent up properly by default, so usually it takes a small amount of bending just to bring up the tip a little bit so that it doesn't catch on the coupler height gauge. Okay, now we're going to trim these stirrup steps, and I'll do that with the flush cutting pliers here, sprue cutters. And now that that's been cut, there's a small amount of sprue left on there, and I'll have to hang on to this carefully while I file that off. This is easier when I'm not doing this in front of a camera. Let's see. Okay, that's pretty good. Remember to make sure that the bottom of the stirrup is straight. So I just grabbed it and straightened it out. That should be pretty good. So there's that piece. We will get the car side here and see how that fits. That one looks like it fits pretty well. So now we'll get some CA and get ready to put that on there. Okay, so now that the stirrup is here, I have a little piece of styrene here with some thick CA on it. And I'm going to dip the legs of the grab iron in CA. Move that out of the way. And now should be able to install grab iron on the car side. Turn that right side up maybe for the camera. Okay, now that's on. It's not quite at the right angle. It's a little bit too vertical still. I'm going to let that glue dry, and then we can adjust it for the proper angle that they should be at. So we'll sit here and do the next one. So again, here's the glue, and this grab iron here had its leg was a little bit bent, so I'm going to have to adjust that. Still having to adjust that. There we go. That's pretty good. And we'll see about doing that on this side. This is much easier when you're not having it filmed. There we go. That one is more at a proper angle. I don't know if I can get enough of an end view to let you see that. But it should be kicked out so that the horizontal surface here of the bottom of the stirrup is flat to the rest of the car, the other horizontal surfaces. that'll give you an idea of how far out it should be deflected. Let's see if I can bend this one out a little bit. Yeah, that looks about right. So we'll install the other two off camera. Okay, the next step will be we are going to be cutting off the brake wheel from the rest of the detail sprue here and starting to, there we go, and getting it ready to install on the staff. This is the only part of this operation that I generally would recommend doing soldering. I know a lot of people put metal parts together with ACC, but those joints usually don't hold up too well, as ACC does not do well in shear between metal parts. Alright, so the part here, when it's on the car, the staff should be spiraling out counterclockwise. So if I'm looking at it and it's spiraling clockwise, that means I'm looking at the bottom of it. I have a piece of wire already grabbed here. The wire is 540 thousandths long. This is 20 thousandths. This should be provided in the kit. And because we're on a paper background here, I'm going to use a heat shield of this metal blade. And I'm going to set that there. Now we have liquid flux. And I'm going to get a little bit of liquid flux on a small modeling type Q-tip and put that on the joint. Make sure there's plenty of flux there. And now I'm going to reach over and grab my 15-watt soldering iron and a little bit of solder. This is all going on just off screen, but let's see if I can tin the iron here in front of you. That should be plenty of solder. I may actually end up having to use a little bit of solder wick. Oops, don't bump the backdrop. It's a little bit hard to see if that took. I'm going to get a little bit more flux. That amount of solder should be plenty to go down into the joint. There we go. I saw the solder flow that time. And there's your brake wheel. And I'm going to check to make sure that the top of that, I can see some solder came through even the top. There's still a little bit of solder here on the side. I think I will grab a little bit of solder wick and take that off. Okay, so I have a little bit of solder wick here, and I'm going to see if I can get in here and wick off a little bit of that solder that was extra. Solder wick is pretty amazing stuff. Let's see. Brake wheel is slightly torqued. But I should be able to straighten that up just by pushing on the wire a little bit. Yeah, that looks pretty straight now. Next option here, if there's a little bit of extra solder, is to just come in and clean that off with a file or sandpaper. It's easy enough to do. Okay, this method of installing the brake wheel on the staff, I'm going to come in and put a little bit of flux on the top of the staff wire. And I only want a little bit of solder, so let's see if I can just get a little. That's plenty. And so what we're going to do here is just come in and tin the last 1/16 or so of an inch on the wire. That'll actually bring up the wire size slightly, effectively. And I'm going to put down this as a heat shield for the white background that we're using. And let's see. Here's a brake wheel. And I'm probably going to switch over and use my pliers for this. The wire should work going through that hole without the solder on it. With the solder on it, it should be a little bit too stiff, and I just bent the brake wheel, or the brake staff. Now let's try this the other way. The nice thing about the wire parts is we can always straighten them out. There we go. Okay, the wheel is now on the staff, and I'm going to straighten the staff out a little bit. This is phosphor bronze wire. It is very resilient in terms of adjusting to being bent and rebent, etc. Let's see if I can make a little stand here to show this effectively. That should work pretty well. Alright, now I'm going to get a little bit more flux. Now in this version of doing this, the center of the wire is actually coming about 1/2 millimeter through the top of the brake wheel. And so I should be able to come in and just touch the top. There we go. And yeah, that should do it. Now I'm going to take a couple of minutes and straighten out the brake staff properly. Okay, there's a slightly too much solder on the top, which is not surprising. So I'm going to come in with a solder wick and wick some of that off with the soldering iron. Notice I'm holding immediately behind the brake wheel with my pliers. And I should be able to get some of that solder to come up. Alright, so now that we've got the brake staff sorted out, we remember that we pre-drilled this hole. I'm going to come over here and carefully test fit this. And that looks a little bit too tall. It's not settling all the way in yet. And by my approximations, about that much should be enough to go down into the car body. Yep, there we go. Now, if it's too tall, we can come in and cut off remnants off the bottom and stick it in further before we glue it. In part 4, let's look at a few tips on finishing the stake pockets and modifications for the various kinds of loads these cars can carry. Alright, I want to show a brief tutorial on how to make black marks on the top of the stake pockets so that you can disguise the fact that the stake pockets are not hollow. Now, I'm using water-based paint here, and just a little cap here. I'm thinning out the black paint enough that I can do this without causing too much trouble. You should be able to do this on painted cars and on unpainted cars in this case. And what I'm doing is just coming in and putting a mark on top of the stake pocket like this. Sometimes this will require a little bit of touch-up work with both the deck color and possibly the side color. So I would do this before you get into your decaling. You probably also want to come in and run some black around down in these end stake pockets. And it doesn't take too long to do the whole car. I'm getting a little bit of black on the sides of the deck boards. But with the deck boards weathering and stuff, you'll probably not notice that anyway.
Drilling out stake pockets.
Some cars you might wish to put a load on or have wire straps or chains going down to the stake pockets. So with these solid stake pockets, that is a little bit of an issue. I figure most cars that might be using the OwlMtModels lumber load will not be needing that, as the stakes do not penetrate down into the stake pockets. Some models like this, however, may need to have this done, so I'm going to show how to do that. I'm going to go in here with I think this is a number 78 drill, and I'm actually going to go from the bottom because I am sure I can see it, and I'm not going to hit any of the details or the car side as I pop through. If I was coming from the top, that would be a problem. So here we're just drilling through. Of course, if you're really intent on doing this and just cleaning them out, you can use the larger drill as well. Once this gets through,
This concludes part 4. We hope you've enjoyed building your F-50 series flat car with us. In part 5, we will be looking at painting and decaling of the model. Don't forget to check the website for additional roster information and techniques for weathering the decks. Please check back regularly with us for updates on upcoming projects, including the new modular lumber load kits and Blackburn Sugar Beet rack add-on kits for Southern Pacific F-50 series flat cars. Feel free to contact us by phone or email with any questions regarding our models.